On the morning of January 29, 2007, the silence at a local video game store in San Antonio, Texas, was deafening. Amber Belulin, the 25-year-old manager known for her punctuality and her dream of becoming a veterinarian, was supposed to open the doors at 9 a.m. Amber was the kind of person who didn't just show up, she was the engine of the store. When 10 a.m. passed and the storefront remained dark, the head office grew uneasy. There were calls to her cell phone and the store's landline went unanswered. They eventually reached out to a nearby branch, asking an employee named Giovanni to check on the situation. Giovanni arrived to find the store locked and the lights off. He peered through the windows, saw nothing, and reported back that the building appeared abandoned. It wasn't until noon that management asked him to return for a second check. This time, the locked room had an inhabitant. When Giovanni returned at noon, he saw a figure moving inside the dark store. It was Brandon, the assistant manager. Brandon let Giovanni inside, but the interior was a vision of chaos. Game boxes were strewn across the floor. The cash register sat wide open, empty of its contents. Loose bills were scattered on the counter. Strangely, Brandon seemed unbothered, acting as if the disarray was simply the result of a messy overnight crew. But when Giovanni pushed open the door to the manager's office to check the safe, he found the true reason for the silence. Lying on the floor was Amber. A plastic bag had been pulled tightly over her head and secured. The safe was empty. The scene looked like a robbery gone wrong. But as investigators arrived, the obvious fact began to crumble. Detectives quickly identified Brandon as their primary suspect. The reasons were compelling. 1. The locked room. When Giovanni arrived earlier that morning, the doors were locked. How did the killer leave? Or were they still inside? 2. The professional conflict. Amber's family revealed she had been planning to fire Brandon that very morning. She had a formal complaint typed up, ready to send to corporate, citing his laziness and poor work ethic. 3. The alibi gap. Brandon was found inside the store with the lights off, standing in the dark with a body in the next room. Robbers usually rely on a gun or a knife for speed. Strangulation with a plastic bag is intimate, slow, and personal. It suggests the killer wanted to watch the life leave the victim. Investigative note. However, forensic science threw a wrench in the theory. Brandon's phone records place him miles away during the estimated time of death, 9 a.m. His fiancée and her parent provided a rock-solid alibi. Despite the red flags, Brandon was technically cleared, yet he remained a social pariah, living under a cloud of suspicion for months. For 7 months, the case went cold. The $100,000 reward sat unclaimed. Then, a witness came forward with a name that shifted the entire investigation. It wasn't Brandon. It was the man who discovered the scene, Giovanni. The witness claimed Giovanni had confessed to the murder the day after it happened. He knew the store's layout because he had worked there previously. He knew there were no cameras. Most importantly, he knew Amber trusted him enough to let him in before opening hours. When police brought Giovanni in, he was a stonewall. He denied everything. Even a compelled DNA sample didn't rattle him, at first. But the day after the DNA was taken, Giovanni took his wife, Veronica, and their children and fled toward the Mexican border. The breakthrough didn't come from forensics. It came from the shadow of domestic terror. 18 months after Amber's death, Veronica called the police. She revealed a harrowing story of a husband who was not just a thief, but a predator. Giovanni had confessed to her the moment the police asked for his DNA. He had kept her in a state of coercive control, using duct tape and threats to keep her silent. When she finally asked for a divorce, he drove her to a remote area, sexually assaulted her at gunpoint, and then, in a bizarre psychological ploy, handed her the gun and told her to kill him. Veronica survived by her wits, convincing him that their children needed a mother. The moment he left her at her mother's house, she chose justice over fear. The U.S. Marshals tracked Giovanni to a relative's house in Mexico. When they broke down the door, they found him in a state of cruel irony. He was sitting on a couch, playing one of the very video games he had stolen from the store the morning he murdered Amber. To extradite him back to Texas, prosecutors had to waive the death penalty. Giovanni eventually took a plea deal, life in prison with the possibility of parole in 2038. He claimed he only killed Amber because she tried to call for help during the robbery, but his history of violence suggested a much darker, more calculated intent.